Hi, I'm Phil the Practical Gardener, and this is tip 24.7, growing tomatoes. So tomatoes are one of the most popular vegetables that you can grow in the garden. Technically they're not really a vegetable, they're actually a fruit, but we do treat them as a vegetable because we grow them on a seasonal basis, even though the plant technically is a perennial. Tomatoes are a very attractive plant to grow. They've got beautiful foliage, they've got lovely yellow flowers, and also this lovely red fruit. Also, they're a very, very versatile plant to consume. So we can eat them fresh in salads, or we can cook them and have them in a range of foods. We can also process them and store them. So I make a lot of pasta sauce, which I freeze in paper cups, which I can use through the year. Tomatoes are a warm season crop. They can be grown in several different ways. There are trailing ones and also ones that will grow scramble over the ground, but most people prefer to grow them like this, either up a stake or a twine as I'm doing here. If you do have a greenhouse, tomatoes could theoretically be grown through the winter. However, the artificial heating that would be required would usually make this uneconomic. It is better to use the greenhouse to start them earlier in the season. So you can purchase the plants in spring, or you can grow them from seed yourself. I do show you how you can grow plants from seed and grow them on in section 13, so have a look there if you're interested in doing that. They are quite easy to grow because they grow quite quickly. The soil temperature needs to be at least 15 degrees centigrade or 60 degrees Fahrenheit for the plants to thrive. The soil should also not be too wet. My solution to create the ideal conditions is to incorporate plenty of organic matter in the soil and grow my tomato plants in raised beds. Watch my tips under section 7, soil care, and section 11, weed management. I removed the cover crop from my tomato bed in mid-spring and I forked the soil over deeply. I then put a stake close to where I will have the tomatoes before putting the plants in, and run a string between the top of the stake and the greenhouse structure. If you have no structure, you would need robust stakes which would allow the plants to grow about 1.8 meters or 6 feet. So you do need quite large stakes. Standard tomatoes such as these should be planted between 45 and 60 centimeters, that's 18 to 24 inches apart. I plant all the tomatoes on the same side of the stake, on the leeward side. This makes weeding easier. Tomatoes are hungry plants, so require a high level of nutrients right through their growing cycle. There are specialist tomato fertilizers available in garden stores. However, and you may have guessed this if you follow my channel, all the nutrients that my tomatoes receive is through the level of fertility that I have developed in my soil through returning organic matter to it. Tomatoes dislike drying out. Water late in the day or early in the morning, being careful to avoid wetting the foliage, which would foster disease. A mulch over the root zone can help to conserve moisture and avoid damage to the shallow root systems. I don't think that you can rely on a deep mulch with tomatoes. They remove a lot of moisture from the soil as they grow, and it can be hard to wet the soil under a heavy mulch. A no-dig system is of course an exception. You will be planting directly into the organic layer. As an alternative, you can grow tomatoes in large pots, in which case be sure to apply very regular water and nutrients, as the potting media will quickly become exhausted of both. As you can see, I constructed a tunnel house over one of my raised beds and covered it with insect-proofed mesh. As a result, I have never been plagued with the various pests that can infest tomatoes. Having said that, there are biological controls, parasitoid wasps or predators, which can be purchased and released into a tomato crop in a greenhouse to control pests such as whitefly or mites. These tabs I'm showing contain eggs of a parasite that controls whitefly. Predatory mites can control pest mites that are also available. These agents may need to be re-released several times through the growing season. A further option is to grow flowering companion plants, which will bring the parasites and predators that attack tomato pests. See my tip 24.4 regarding companion plants for vegetables, and also 10.2 on companion planting generally in the garden. As a last resort, you can spray. However, be careful to select sprays that won't harm bees, and spray during the evening when the bees have gone to bed. There are several fungal and bacterial diseases that are prone to attacking tomatoes as the season progresses. Early and late blight are the worst culprits. Again, if you are comfortable with using sprays, there are fungicides that have a protective function. These need to be applied before infection takes hold. They won't eradicate fungal attack. some of these sprays are organically acceptable. As the tomato plants grow, it should be tied loosely to the stake or the tie, as I have in this case here. You don't need to allow much for growth of the stem. They don't increase much in diameter as the plant grows taller. There are various tomato ties on the market that clip on and off easily. You should sterilize these between crops. However, I simply use a natural twine. When I remove the plants at the end of the season, I simply cut the ties and throw them out with the tomato waste. This is much the simplest way. It eliminates the risk of transmitting virus, and the twine will naturally decompose and add to the fertility of the soil. Win-win. The laterals appear above each leaf should be removed as soon as possible. I usually just simply pull them sideways, and that way I don't actually have to touch the plant, so I'm not in danger of transmitting the virus. I do this by pulling the laterals off with a sharp tug to one side. If you choose to cut them, you will need to sterilize your implement periodically, as tools can carry sap to other plants and spread virus. If the laterals are left to grow, they will make a congested mass that will harbor pests and diseases and not allow enough light for the fruit to ripen. It can also be a good idea to remove the older leaves. This will provide better light and discourage disease. The tomato flowers do need some form of pollinating agent. Usually this is done by pollinating insects, such as honeybees, which should be present in your garden environment. However, honeybees won't navigate around a greenhouse, so instead bumblebees are used by commercial operators. Bumblebees aren't phased by the enclosure. If you wish, you can purchase the small hives. However, they usually won't survive through the entire growing season, so you may need to replace them. This is only worthwhile if you have a fair-sized greenhouse. Tomato flowers are self-pollinating if they get some assistance. That can be done by tapping the flower trusses with a stick. This might be the most practical option for a small greenhouse. The mesh cover that I have on this tunnel house here actually allows the wind through, and so I don't really have to rely on the tapping too much, but I still do it. Birds are very prone to attacking the ripening fruit. That is another advantage in having a covered house. You can pick the fruit just as they colour up, but to be honest, they never develop the full flavour that is unique to homegrown tomatoes. To harvest the tomatoes, lift and twist the fruit. At the end of the season, I remove the tomato plants. As I mentioned earlier, I simply cut the twine away from the supports. I dig up the roots and throw all of the crop remnants onto a mulched area, such as my orchard or flower gardens. If you put them back in the vegetable garden or compost them, there is a risk of transmitting virus into the next season's crop, or onto related crops such as potatoes or peppers. I also clean the stakes and paint them with a mixture of isopropyl alcohol, again to prevent the carryover of virus. I mentioned before that these tomatoes that I have, they don't receive any artificial imports. I don't bring anything into the property. I simply return organic matter, and that is sufficient for them. I also have very little trouble with pests or even diseases in this covered house that I have. So that's it for this tip. Thank you for watching it through to the end, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so, and also press the like button to be sure to see further tips as they come online. Thank you for watching. Bye now.